going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, the console gaming podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 9. And I'm actually recording this a little bit later in the week than I'd like to. It's the Sunday morning, Easter. So this episode will go live tomorrow morning. And it's just been one of those weeks, where just things, you get busy at work, you're trying to squeeze in that gaming time, family stuff comes up, all the rest. So it is what it is. So if my voice sounds a little funny, it's because it's literally sunrise. It's coming up. I got some coffee with me to sit down and record this episode. So hope you're all doing well out there, staying safe, playing lots of video games, and by the time this goes live, Easter will have been completed. And if you celebrate, happy Easter to you. And he is risen, for those who are a little religious out there. So, again, hope you're all doing well out there. Now, for the uninitiated, remember, the best way to support the show is to leave a comment and rating on the show. It's super, super helpful, and I really do appreciate it. So if you could type in a comment, whatever it is, we'll have a few topics to discuss, too, that you can drop your insights on. So leave a comment, leave a rating, like the YouTube video, all the rest, you know the drill. Also, feel free to join us over on Locals. That's where I'm trying to cultivate the community, get you over there. So it's the GamesiteChronicles.locals.com. And lastly, follow us on Twitter at Gamesite Podcast, where you get feeds for the episodes and just funny little insights, little quips, likes on articles and stuff like that from me, myself, and I. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, remember, you can catch new episodes each week, Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's when each new episodes go up. So you can expect that cadence. We've been maintaining that, and it's working pretty well. And before we get into what the show's going to be about, games we're playing, any news items, all the usual things we cover on the podcast, I want to share a milestone that this podcast has surpassed that I'm pretty stoked about. And that is, we have surpassed 50 downloads for the podcast. Now, I know that's, in the podcast world, the big scheme of things, that's nothing. But I'm pretty stoked on that. And really, like, over half of that stuff has happened in the last 2 weeks. So I don't know what's really gone on out there in the ether, but I'm super stoked on it. So it's a big milestone. I'm proud of it, and couldn't have done it without you. So thank you for those of you that have tuned into the show, that are tuning into the show, engaging with it, and all the rest. So I really do appreciate it. I'm super stoked on that, and let's keep it going. Next milestone, 100. Let's hit 100 downloads this next week. That would be super stoked. That would be awesome, absolutely awesome. Now, for this week's episode, the main topic I want to talk about is that PlayStation Plus, is that hurting game devs? Because there's an interesting article that came out about that, and then by proxy, we'll inevitably get into Game Pass. Is Game Pass hurting devs? And that's the question I'm posing out there. But and also we'll get into games I'm playing. But before we get into that, there are 2 small items that I wanted to quickly cover. The first of which is, I discovered this new game. This new game called Steelrising dropped a gameplay trailer this past week. And I hadn't really heard about this game, but it's the upcoming action RPG from Spiders. That's the developer's name, who have they're behind the games Greedfall, Technomancer, and Bound by Flame. Now, I haven't played any of those games, but I know I've heard of the Technomancer, and I've got Greedfall, actually. That was hit on PS Plus, I think late last year, the PS5 version of it. And Greedfall actually looks kind of cool. It's like the open world RPG, kind of set in almost, I don't know what the right term of it is, but revolutionary times. And I don't know, it looks kind of cool, and I definitely would like to try it out at some point. So this kind of, the developer kind of seems to be putting out these, I don't know, AA style of games, and Steelrising looks awesome. So they put out approximately 5-minute long trailer, show off some gameplay, have the devs talking over a little bit about the game and kind of what you can expect. And so this game actually takes place during the French Revolution, approximately 1789, where the revolution itself is actually suppressed by King Louis's automaton army. So he's got an army of robots, and he's suppressing the revolution. And you actually play a female automaton that's set out to stop the King Louis's tyranny with these robots and continue the revolution. And I love that premise. That's awesome. It's great setting, French Revolution, and that premise is just so dope, super dope. And so you watching some gameplay, and this is gonna sound a little generic, but it looks to have like a Soul style of combat, as well as a little bit of Nier in there in terms of combat, with this being an action RPG. Now, I don't know if it has the Souls mechanics in terms of, the death or some sort of currency that you use to level up your character, etc. I don't know any of that. They don't talk about any of that. But just from the camera angles, the aesthetics, the combat styles, just very, very similar to the Soul style games, which is right up my alley, and it definitely appeals to me. So it looks awesome. I don't know. Check it out. The gameplay also shows that you can like change outfits, so you can put different like outfits on your robot, different armor pieces. You can also attach different weapons to your arms and stuff like that. So one of the weapons they show in the game is like this big fan. Sorry, my dog is. Anyways, sorry, my dog is running around here. And I was like, dog, dude, I'm trying to record. But anyways, you can attach weapons to like your arms. So one of the cool weapons they showed off is like this fan that expands out into a shield, just kind of like folds out, and all you can use it to like cut people, block stuff. It looked really cool. So I'm assuming there's all these different kind of weapons you can attach and modify your robot with. And they also showed some of like the French cities you'll be exploring. The atmosphere looks awesome. The aesthetics looks really cool. Again, French cities, French revolutionary times, and you almost kind of get a very light Bloodborne aesthetics. Just in terms of like the architecture, it's kind of that style of architecture. Obviously, it's not nearly as dark, and it isn't not nearly as gothic by any means. It's certainly a lot brighter, but those are the kind of vibes I'm getting, and it just looks really, really cool. Now, this game comes out September 8th, 2022. I think it originally had like a summertime release date, but they had to push it back a little bit. So September 8th, 2022. It's called Steelrising. I don't know. I think this game looks really dope, and it's certainly on my radar now just because it looks really cool. So check out that gameplay trailer. I know Push Square, so pushsquare.com, PlayStation website, has the trailer on there. I'm sure you can just Google it or YouTube it as well. But check it out, man. I think it looks super cool, and I'm excited to play it at some point when it comes out. The other piece of news item, it's kind of a smaller little bit, but I thought it was worth kind of bringing up because it plays into the possibilities of what if. And that is, PlayStation updated their studios banner. So the banner where they kind of show like first party games, highlighting their first party studios and stuff like that. And Death Stranding is now on this banner. And that started leading to speculation around, oh, is PlayStation acquiring Kojima Productions? Are they going to be a first party studio now? And so Twitter lit up, articles are coming out. And then the next day, Kojima actually came out with a tweet, and he said, and I quote, "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, but Kojima Productions has been and will continue to be an independent studio." So he shot those, end quote. So he shot those rumors down pretty quick. But before seeing Kojima's tweet, I was actually thinking, like, this makes sense. Though I have no idea how much it cost. I don't know what Kojima Productions is worth. I have to imagine Kojima just getting a contract and getting a game directly from Kojima is probably on the spendy side. The dude's an icon in the industry. So I have no idea how much it'd cost to actually acquire his studios. But, in this crazy era of acquisitions, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if that was a move that was going to be made by Sony. And I think it makes sense. I mean, Kojima has kind of this long history with PlayStation. Again, I know it's more tied to Konami and their IPs, with Metal Gear Solid. I'd put a little Silent Hill in there, etc. But I don't know. I just think like, okay, I could see that happening. But then he came out, obviously shot that down real quick. And you know what? In a way, I'm kind of glad that he's kind of put that out there, because it's a breath of fresh air in this era of just insane acquisitions and consolidations. And I know there's a lot of people that are kind of cheering on the next, big acquisition. Square Enix, Capcom, those huge publishers. Are they, is Microsoft going to purchase those next, or is Sony going to buy them next? And that's kind of the question. Like, who are they going to buy next? What's the next acquisition? It's like, dude, slow it down, man. Like, this isn't necessarily a good thing to have all this consolidation. And just because, like, my fear is, if we have all this consolidation, does that increase the barrier of entry for smaller devs? And smaller devs, indie games, I've long been trying to champion indie games, at least the good ones. Because, again, there's a lot of crap out there, little shovelware, but there are some really good ones out there and some really talented devs that are putting out some really interesting ideas. And so if we have all of this consolidation, I just feel like it's going to be harder for them to kind of get their games on these platforms and really shine in this, heavy first party space. I mean, really. So I don't know, man. Be careful what you wish for. But I thought it was really interesting. And Sony has done this before, because before Bluepoint was developed, they actually posted, I think, on one of their Twitter accounts, the Welcome to the Family PlayStation thing with the Demon Souls game. And, Bluepoint was kind of highlighted there, and that led to speculation there. Obviously, that came to fruition. So maybe Kojima's just not ready to announce it. We can speculate here, but, I mean, as of now, it seems like Kojima is still maintaining his independence. But who knows? These are crazy times that we're living in. So now let's get into some of the games I've been playing. And as always, let me know what games you've been playing down in the comments. I want to read through those, and I want to start bringing those into the show. So please, let me know what you've been playing out there. For me, I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but it's been Horizon Forbidden West. However, I do have some exciting news to share. I have finally finished Horizon Forbidden West. I rolled the credits. Actually, it was technically yesterday morning when I finished the game finally. And I also got the platinum. I was looking at my trophy. I'm not a big trophy hunter, but if there's a game where I don't have to like replay it 15 times, do New Game Plus, and it's more about the collectibles and maybe a few challenges, I'm like, okay, maybe I'll go for it. And it was earlier this week, I started looking at the trophies, and I was like, oh, I'm actually pretty close to getting the platinum. Didn't even realize it. So I was like, let's do it. I'm going to go for it. I just had to do a couple extra things I probably wouldn't normally have done on the side quest front, or like there's that strike game you have to play a couple times, which I'm not really interested in, like the side games that they have in some of these big RPGs, like Gwent, for example. I played a little bit of Gwent, wasn't really good at it, and it's like, I want to play The Witcher, I don't really want to play Gwent, but I digress there. So I got the platinum trophy. I was super stoked on that, and again, no spoil. I won't spoil anything here, but I gotta say, great ending. And it gets me excited for what a potential sequel could look like if they were to make it. I think they left enough room to do so I welcome it, though. I thinking about it, I was like, oh, it'll probably another 5 years, so gotta wait a while. But man, what a great game! And just reflecting back, like, I think it's such an improvement from the first game without compromising what makes the game so great. I really think they kind of took all of the elements of the first game, all the characters, further developed them, added to, wrote a great story, and just expanded on all of the little details and, elements of the first game. And I just think they really did it brilliantly. I thought it was very well done. I truly think it just expands upon all this stuff. And it's because, in some sequels, you kind of get things that are changed up for the sake of them being changed up. Whereas this, I really felt like it kept the core tenet, but just really expanded upon it. Almost like taking, here's your base Lego set, and then just kind of building on top of that. It's great. It's really great. I definitely think it'll be up there in the Game of the Year conversation. Though, I think it's got some stiff competition, as we talked about last week. But now that game is out of the way, it's time to move on to the next game. And so now I do have room for Elden Ring. Logic dictates that I would jump into Elden Ring, but actually I'm going to jump into Lego Star Wars, because as I mentioned last week, I picked up that game, and it looks awesome. And I just think it's going to kind of just, I don't know, satisfy that collectathon itch I've kind of got going right now. So I'm probably going to jump into Lego Star Wars next. But like I said, let me know what you're playing down in the comments below. And with that, let's get into this week's main topic. And as I look at the timestamp here, this will probably be a shorter episode, but nonetheless, I do think the conversation is important. And before we get into it, I do want to preface this. I was actually going to do a different topic for the show because Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the Sonic 2 movie released. And while I haven't seen it, nor have I seen the first one, I did want to sit down and watch the first one. But I thought it'd be fun to talk about gaming and transmedia. So what games have successfully came over to transmedia and what games haven't, and what games or stories would I like to see transcend into, movies or television. But we'll save that topic for another time. So this week, because there was a couple articles that came out that I was like, okay, I really feel like we're gonna hit on this topic again. And that's the question, as we mentioned earlier in the show: is PlayStation Plus hurting game devs? And then by proxy, is Game Pass hurting game devs? And again, this kind of came about. This topic came about because there were some articles that started coming about the Oddworld Soulstorm developer, saying he's been negatively impacted by putting his game on PS Plus day one. And I think it was originally broke by a Video Games Chronicle, VGC. But I'm going to kind of reference this article from Push Square because I think they really did a nice job at kind of putting in some key points as well as having some nice perspective about this claim here. So here's some of the key points. Basically, the devs bigwig, or kind of one of the head guys over there, Lauren Lanning. He was on an Xbox podcast, I believe. I don't know which one it was, but he described this deal of putting Oddworld Soulstorm on PS Plus day one as, quote, devastating. He described needing financial support in order to finish the project. So apparently they were kind of in a little financial struggle towards getting the game pushed out and finishing it up. And so they were kind of seeking some sort of financial deal to kind of push them through the end there. And that's when they struck a deal with Sony to get some funding and then put it on PS Plus. And so presumptively, kind of based on that context, you would assume it was this lump sum of money being dumped into them to get them to the finish line and push the game out. And so when the game actually came out in April 2021, it was said to have been downloaded 4 million times by PS Plus users, which is pretty good, I would say, especially for that kind of weird game. However, he stated that full price sales were less than predicted. Now, when the game launched, it's something to keep in mind, it didn't really launch to much critical success. Now, I think there are obviously some Oddworld fans out there that enjoyed the game and were very much looking forward to it. But I think for the majority of folks, myself included, because I've never really played these games, they've always looked super weird to me. But I think for the majority of us, we're just kind of like, man, I'll get it on PS Plus, sure, but it's not something I would pick up otherwise. But I looked up their Metacritic score just for context here, and it's sitting at a 66. I think a user score we're out in the sixes as well. So not the best by any means. And so I want to quote the article here, the last paragraph here, because I thought it really does a nice job kind of hitting on some key points. So again, the article is on pushsquare.com. I think these guys do a really great job. And so at the end of it, I quote, "But it's interesting to hear someone speak somewhat negatively about subscription services. While Sony has been quieter on this front, Microsoft's PR has only ever painted Game Pass as positive for developers, promising that pretty much guarantees increased sales and engagement. This optimistic outlook is predictable given the importance of the business model to Xbox. And obviously it'd be unfair to compare PS Plus directly to what the team in green is doing. But here's a developer who perhaps is a little more skeptical of subscriptions with first-hand experience of it all." End quote. And I think that article kind of puts it into nice context, kind of sums it up nicely. In that, yeah, we're hearing kind of conflicting things from both sides. The Xbox camp, it's all rosy and devs love it, and there are certainly instances of that where I truly think these devs are getting some good deals. But then on the other end, you hear it again, the PlayStation camp. While we know the current state of PS Plus isn't the same as Game Pass, though with Project Spartus we're getting that, except day one. I mean, that's the big difference between the two services. However, here's an example of a day one launch where the developer wasn't really happy. And so I think this touches and kind of bleeds into what we touched on a little bit before with the new PlayStation Plus being launched, as well as Game Pass, about the profitability of this new kind of subscription model world that Game Pass has really thrust us all in the gaming industry into. And again, I think it's important to keep in mind that Game Pass is not profitable. Phil Spencer's come out and said that Game Pass is sustainable. There's a difference there, so we have to keep that in mind. It has not yet reached profitability. And so it just makes you wonder. Now, I want to caveat this, that if you do read the article, it does sound like that maybe the developer didn't really do a good job at negotiating. I mean, clearly they needed money to get to the finish line, so there were some financial problems, and they probably didn't negotiate the best deal for them. And then the other thing to think of is like, okay, you did get 4 million downloads, which is great, but if it wasn't on PS Plus day one, would you have gotten that same amount of engagement? Would you have sold 4 million copies? I don't think they would have. I mean, to be honest, it's a very niche game, kind of a little bit weird. I don't know. Who's to say? But clearly, things didn't line up, and I think you're just disappointed at the end of the deal that you got. But again, about profitability, I think this kind of puts into perspective that if the deal's not good for you up front and you're not getting game sales because you've put it on some sort of free service, then you're going to need some other way to make money. And if not, you're going to be in financial trouble. And this coincides with another article that dropped yesterday, so it'd be Saturday, about other ways to make money. And so it's reported by Video Games Chronicles that they're stating Microsoft is exploring integrating ads into its free-to-play games. Now, I discovered this on Twitter, and before I get into a little bit more what the article talks about and this idea, and then we'll tie it back to PS Plus and Game Pass. So I found it on Twitter, and my God, the Twitter dialogue on this stuff is just so filled with fanboy garbage. It makes you want to vomit. I don't know. There's just so many ignorant people out there, and so many people just saying things for clout that it's unbearable at times. It really is. Like I'm reading some of this stuff and I'm like, okay, it's like you kind of got maybe a fair point, but like really, like it's so hard to read through some of this stuff, and it's amazing to me that people are actively defending Microsoft as a corporation. Like there was one user in particular, I don't remember his username, and I wouldn't call him out that like directly anyways, but he was stating that it's good that they make more money. It's going to be good. This is a good thing. And I guess because like that money is going to be put back into you as for a more consumer friendly service. And I hate that term, by the way. I can't, it just grinds my gears, as the late Peter Griffin would say. I don't know why I said late. I mean, Family Guy is still a thing, but anywho. But like why do you care? Why are you defending this corporation? Why do people feel the need to defend corporations based on the box that they play on? I don't understand that mentality. I really don't. Like, unless you're a shareholder and you actually have financial stake in the company, why are you defending them? Why do you care if they make more money? Now, you can make the argument that they make more money, then it gets put back into first party development, and maybe you get better games. Okay, maybe. But in the Xbox camp, have we really seen that? I don't know, but I don't think so. Would be my guess. But regardless of any of that, I don't understand this need to defend the big corporation. They don't care about you. You do realize that, right? They give two shits about you. They do not care. You're just dollar signs to them. So like, why go out of your way to defend them? And I know I'm going a little bit of rant here, but it's almost like the box that people play on, they're like emotionally tied to it. And so when someone attacks that box and the company behind that box, it emotionally attacks them. and I guess there, a natural defense mechanism kicks in. I don't know. I guess I can slightly understand that to a degree. Trying to use empathy here, which that's the thing I think we could all use is a little bit more empathy. Just try to put yourselves, get outside of yourself for once. Try to have some perspective and look at the situation rationally, logically. I think we would have better dialogue out there. But nonetheless, man, dude, is some wild dialogue out there, and I wanted to call that out. But anyways, back to the article. So the article goes into details stating that Microsoft isn't currently interested in collecting a cut of the ad revenue, as it really wants to provide more money-making opportunities to the devs who are making free-to-play games for their platform. And I think that's an interesting point, is that it's, not necessarily for them, but they're going to be looking for ways to probably attract talent to the platform and say, hey, we've got a way you can make some money through this ad revenue generation. So maybe more of a recruitment tactic more than a money-making tactic at this point. But there could be something else at play here. We'll get back to that. Now, in-game advertising isn't new, though. We've seen this in many different games and publishers. And actually, a lot of the Xbox people have pointed out that, they pointed out to an article where I think Sony was exploring something similar in terms, not necessarily directly at free-play games, but in-game advertising. They were exploring that. But again, this isn't new. We've seen this before. I mean, product placement is not new in video games. It's everywhere. And if I recall, EA actually recently did this with in-game advertisement with one of their sports titles, and that received massive backlash. Like I think it was in between in between games for one of their sports games where you'd roll like a 30-second ad or something, and then you get to go play in the game. So this isn't new. It's been explored, but I think what's interesting is the way Xbox is going about it in the current state that we see ourselves in the gaming industry. So again, we mentioned Xbox Game Pass not being profitable. This is a potential avenue for them to explore for not only other devs, again, to theoretically attract talent and say, hey, we've got, a different way you can make some money on top of maybe whatever we're going to pay for Game Pass, but maybe to use in their own games. Xbox has free-to-play games. I mean, Halo, that multiplayer is free-to-play. So, if they find that this is something that's beneficial or that could work well, boom, they can implement it into their own games. But the thing I really want to hit on is, if game sales aren't the driving factor in making money in this new subscription model world, I should say, then it's got to be offset somewhere else. And that's where we see the likes of, microtransactions, selling skins, battle passes, game passes, all this DLC add-on content that's paid for within the games, especially, live service games and free-to-play games. And so who's to say that this isn't another potential, revenue generating tactic within games? And I could totally see that. Now, one of the interesting things that I kind of been thinking about with this is that, okay, in the article, it states that Microsoft's exploring this for free-to-play games. So obviously we think of the likes of like Fortnite, Apex Legends, those style of games. Maybe you could even put Destiny in there. That's technically free-to-play. At least, the base game is. And, again, I'd throw Halo in that category. So, you have that aspect of it, and that's kind of the way it's being positioned. But if you think about it, in the way a lot of Xbox gamers do think about it, is with Game Pass, those games are all technically free to play. Well, I mean, not technically, but perceived as free to play, because you pay the subscription service and you have access to all these games that feel like they're for free. And so, Phil Spencer in Microsoft over there, they love their word salads for sure, and they never come right out and say things. So could this mean potentially that when they say free to play games, they also mean Game Pass games? I could see it work, being one and the same. Because, and we'll touch on this a little bit, but a lot of people, I think of Xbox as just this almost, very low barrier to entry library of games that you just get all these games for free now because you're on Game Pass. So I don't know, maybe a little bit of food for thought there. But all of this and this idea of other revenue generation leads me kind of to the bigger point I wanted to make about subscription services and video games and these revenue generating tactics that are going to be needed to offset what would have been just straight up video game sales. And that is, I think we as gamers really need to consider the impact of what subscription services means to video games, and really think about it and ask ourselves, is this what we want? Because in this, if we continue to move this direction, if we continue to go to where, the big platform holders are all going to have subscription services and we're not really going to buy games anymore, or maybe games aren't even available, let's say a la carte, kind of like what we've seen with movies and music. Now, again, you can still buy movies, you can still buy music, but I would argue that the majority of people don't. I mean, when's the last time you bought music? I mean, when's the last time you bought a movie? Movies maybe more so. I know there's still movie collectors out there, but music, I don't really know anyone buying music these days. I mean, you just stream them on the platforms, right? So if we continue to move into that direction, and then now the only way that devs are kind of generating money is by taking a piece of this subscription model, which is potentially less of a pool than having individual game sales being generated across the industry, because I mean you're paying less for that subscription service than you would on a per game basis. Now I understand that this adds up with millions of subscribers, but time will tell with this. But if that's the case, there's less of a pie to take from the subscription money than there is with individual game sales, and there's got to be other ways to cover the cost of development, because development is very expensive. Even for smaller games, it's very expensive. So they've got to explore new ways to generate revenue, and this is where I think this comes in, and that's why we're going to see more games shift to microtransactions, passes, and then possibly ads in video games is where we're seeing being explored here. So because they have to find ways to make money to sustain the business. And so if all games are going to kind of shift to that, because again, you're not really going to be selling your games directly one-to-one to the consumer, then games have to shift to become and adapt to that model. And so this means we'll potentially get more, more live service games, more microtransactions, possibly ads in between, like let's say multiplayer matches or in between levels of a game, etc. So that the way games are made will shift and adapt to these new times that we're in. And so I ask, is that what we want here as gamers? Is that what we want? Do we want to just play live service games? Do we want to be bombarded with ads in our games that potentially take out the immersion of the whatever game that you're in? Immersion's important, especially in single player games. But is this what we want? And I think that's what we have to ask ourselves. And that's what we really have to think about and be careful what we ask for and what we're championing and cheering on. Now, with this said, I think about games like Elden Ring, a lot of the first party PlayStation titles, which I personally love. Even games like Gears of War. I love the Gears of War games, albeit the last, like number 5 was, I didn't like that game as much as I think a lot of other people did, but nonetheless, I love Gears of War as a franchise. And even Xbox has a couple other, from last generation first party titles that I was like, okay, I feel it. I mean, Sunset Overdrive is one of them, though Insomniac is no longer available to make that game again. But I think about these games, and would they exist in this new, would these style of games exist in this new world? And I don't know that they would, because rather than delivering these, as Sony would call them, generation defining experiences, but kind of these single player well catered experiences, it's less about that and more about keeping people tied to a service and continuously trying to extract money from these folks as they're being tied to this platform. So I'm not saying single player games or these high quality games would go away by any means, but I'm just saying that that's less of the focus. Now, I don't normally like to kind of bring in other podcast ideas, because I only listen to one other podcast, and that's Sacred Symbols. I've mentioned that before. But Colin Moriarty over there actually kind of put out this idea that I thought was really interesting, and it ties into this theme that we're playing, and this kind of cause for concern that I have with this shift towards subscription models in gaming. And I think he put it really succinctly, and he basically said that he's afraid of what Game Pass is training gamers to do, which is essentially not buy games. And I was like, I never really thought about it like that in terms of training people to do. Because if you think about it, the way they market Xbox Game Pass, how many deals it is, you're able to stack up subscriptions. You can get in for as low as $1 as a new person. And it's like, okay, well, why would I pay, $30 to $60 for a new game when I can pay as little as $1 to join the service and play the same game? Why? I mean, I think a lot of us like to save money, get a good deal. So why wouldn't you do that? That's a fair question. And again, you see so many people talk about the value, consumer friendly, yada, yada, yada. I get it. But that's what they're training you to do. They want you to do that. And, we talked about it before. How many games do Xbox gamers buy? I know there are exceptions to the rule. I'm one of them. Actually, this past week I actually just bought Halo Infinite. I've already played the game. I played it on Game Pass. I already beat it, but I bought it anyway. It was on sale for like $20, and I was like, I want to have this game. I'm a physical game collector, and I was like, I have all the other Halo games. So it's like, so I want to be able to have this game just to say I've got all the Halo games. So I picked it up. So again, I know I'm the exception to the rule, and I know there are others out there, like my buddy Rob, friend of the show. He buys physical games all the time, and he has an extensive collection, by the way, which shout out to you, Rob. But how many games are these Xbox gamers buying? Again, we've heard it before that Game Pass subscribers buy more games, but I'm not convinced of that yet until I see the numbers. I want to see the analysis. But again, if you just look at the conversation online around Xbox, it's always about Game Pass. I constantly see it all the time. There's like, I see people say, I'm finally jumping into, the Xbox Series X, or they just got an Xbox Series S for Game Pass. I'm jumping into Game Pass. It's all about Game Pass. That's all Microsoft talks about. That's all Xbox gamers talk about. It's all about the Game Pass. And then we also see in the online conversation that I'll just wait for it to come to Game Pass. I mean, how many times do we see that? How many times have you seen that? Have you even said it yourself? I'm sure that you've at least seen it somewhere in the online ether, because I see that often, and I feel like that's becoming a staple, and that's part of the conditioning that's happening. Is that, I'm not going to buy the game. I'll just wait for it to come out on Game Pass. And so again, when I talked about, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, that I believe that Game Pass is changing the perception of how we value games. This is part of it. Because again, you're equating that dollar figure. And again, maybe subconsciously or subconsciously, or maybe it's because Microsoft and Xbox themselves are telling you that you should pay less for games, that's the direction we're heading. And so again, if this is the direction we're going, then gamers are going to spend less for games, because we're going to be paying, $10 to $15. That'll eventually go up to, I could see upwards of $25 per month, but you're paying less for games than on a per game basis at $60, $70. And you can even lower that to $30 for some games. And so it's almost as if like companies really aren't giving you a choice, in a way forcing you to pay less to play. Not literally, but why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you? So let's say with the new PlayStation Plus, they do have day one games, and it's $20 a month. Why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you pay $20 to get access to all of PlayStation's first party games? Day one, day and date. Yeah, that's a no-brainer. I think A lot of people feel the same way, and I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people get behind Game Pass. Is like, why wouldn't I pay $15 a month to get access to all these day one titles and this pretty good library of games? I agree. And so if that's the mindset that we're having, that's the way that we're going, games aren't going to be a la carte. You're not going to be able to buy them, and you're paying less for video games. I kind of put that in quotes because, again, I just the math, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like this adds up. And so if there's less money in that pool, then there has to be other ways to generate revenue in games to sustain this model, to help the devs. And I can't help but think that if this is the way we go, then yeah, the way games are made are gonna change. The style of games that we get are gonna change. And I feel like the barrier of entry is gonna be higher because it's gonna be harder to make money. I don't know if this is all reality. And I also think I don't know that we have enough evidence yet. I still think we're early on into this, and kind of it's one of those things that time will tell as more developers kind of come forward with this, their experiences maybe with Game Pass directly. We'll see how this plays out, but I really wanted to kind of hit on this subject because I think it's important and kind of put out some food for thought for folks out there, to think about what you're asking for here, and to try to put these things in perspective. But that's all I got for you guys this week. A little bit shorter of an episode, but an important topic nonetheless, because, man, it's an interesting time out there in the video games world. But I don't know. I got this. I hate to be so dark and maybe pessimistic, but I don't know, man. I'm not the biggest fan of some of the directions that we're going in. I'm worried because I love video games. I've grown up with video games. I've been playing games practically my whole life. And again, I've mentioned before, I'm old school. I like collecting my games. I like having physical copies. I like purchasing them, owning them a la carte. We've talked about in the past before about the importance of game preservation. And then, so if we're not buying or owning games, then, it's up to these platforms to worry about game preservation. And we know that's not necessarily always a priority for them, especially in the Sony camp. So I don't know, man. It's an interesting time in the gaming industry, but this is an important topic. So let me know what you think about this, about the potential of subscription services hurting game devs and the sustainability or profitability of these subscription services like Game Pass, the new PS Plus, etc. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Remember that leaving a comment and a rating for the podcast is super helpful, and I would very much appreciate it. And again, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your kindness, your love and support. And remember, new episodes of the show every Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And until next time, I'm Bonfire, and I will see you online.